Hi, you're with Nadine van der Linden, and today I'm talking about how confidence issues can turn up in unnecessary self-blame in therapists. So one of the things that commonly happens in therapy is that clients don't reveal everything that is going on with them in their journey at the beginning or even well into the relationship of therapy. And then for varying reasons, there can be what seem like bombshell disclosures. Got my little guy with me here today. It's a very cold day in Perth and he's wanting the warmth, but unfortunately he does bark from time to time too. So as I was saying, these disclosures happen, and to us as therapists, they can feel like bombshells or they can be quite frustrating because we're thinking, well, I thought the priority was working on this, and now this is happening, and that's not in my formulation, and I would have been able to help you with that issue if you had told me. However, one pattern response that comes up is therapists thinking, I must have done something wrong and therefore this client doesn't trust me. And so I'm a bad therapist, essentially. And that generally isn't the case. There are some examples where therapists perhaps may be sending a message either explicitly or implicitly that they cannot handle certain types of disclosures. So sometimes this comes up when you talk to people with sexual abuse histories. They will say, I don't think my therapist could handle that, or they didn't seem to have kind of the substance there to be able to deal with that. Sometimes that's the client's perception as well, because they've had people in their life who haven't been able to handle their disclosures. But there are, in a small minority of therapists, there is a I don't go there type message going on, or trauma's a bit too much for me, and they actually explicitly say those things. But for most therapists, when this happens in your therapy room, it's not because you haven't provided the relationship that you need to. It's got to do with a variety of things. One of them is that clients sometimes don't know themselves how much of a problem something is. And then they'll experience a rock bottom moment that makes it very clear. And this is really typical with addiction. So many of our clients are substance using and not fully disclosing about that. Also, the modes or the parts of the client that carry the addiction can tend to be very secretive in their attempts to maintain addiction. So they have the client has a lot of patterns around evasiveness. And so keeping things undercover is very, very normal for them, and they may not even realize that they're doing that in therapy. Also, sometimes through the work, big things reveal themselves to clients that they didn't have at the front center of their mind, or they weren't ready, or sometimes they are just people who take a long time to trust. They've had bad experience of being judged or shamed, and they're convinced that the therapist is going to do that no matter how the therapist presents themselves. So this is something that I think is very important, because things like that do happen, these bombshell type disclosures. This can happen 2 years, 3 years into therapy. And if you go down the path of this is my fault, I obviously did something wrong, it rocks your confidence. So I'm sharing this with you today, and I hope that it's helpful. And instead, if this happens to you, or I should probably say next time this happens to you, I want you to place more of the responsibility onto the client for that disclosure, and not in a blaming way, but more of a like, okay, we know this now, and how are we going to approach it, rather than taking it down the pathway of, I mustn't be good at my job, or I've done something wrong, or if I presented a more warm and caring relationship, or perhaps I'm too authoritarian, that this wouldn't have happened. That's it for me today, and I hope that you find this video useful.